All right. And we're live. And I was muted, and we're live.
Hello? Oh, can you hear us?
Yeah. Why is this still here? Okay. All right, we're good. We're good. For some reason, the right-click thing didn't disappear. Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the only show where you can listen to two idiots on the internet talk about anything from 80s nostalgic treasures to AAA modern-day dumpster fires. And unlike the Ronald McDonald House, we will never throw you out.
That's right. This is Colleidocast, where a collision of culture and character.
Correct.
The only podcast. This is the only podcast that's out there.
Neither of which the Ronald McDonald House has. So today,
well, we are recording a day late today, due to one of the team members here having weak antibodies, weak immune system, almost no white blood cells, and succumbing to COVID. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know who that is. I am a white antibody. I mean, look at me, like friggin'.
You are an antibody.
I'm so white.
If your body was to come in contact with an actual body, there would be an explosion.
Yeah, I got the coof last week. So I was kind of on the fence about recording, but we got here.
And you look, I mean, you do have a sickly pallor to you. I don't know if it's just the lighting, but you got like a green hue to your face. And
yeah, that's the COVID. It turns your skin green.
And these like bleeding sores on your lips.
All right.
And your hair's like falling out.
Listen, I got into a fight at work. That's why I got this thing here.
Based.
Someone made fun of me for getting COVID.
So this is episode 3. Last week we talked about Invincible, an animated feature, and today we're going to talk about Howl's Moving Castle, another animated film this time.
Very different in tone,
extremely
and
different. You might hear Howl's Moving Castle described as spellbinding on the poster. It's definitely a family-friendly movie as opposed to Invincible with its endless scenes of graphic violence and gore and dismemberment.
And I'm kind of glad that you suggested this one, because when I was younger, it came out when I was in high school, I think. And I always wanted to watch it, and I think I got a chance one day to watch it, and I don't know, I just couldn't pay attention for whatever reason. I find that's true for like a lot of things when you're younger. Like you'll go and play or watch something, and you can't really get into it or understand it until you're a little older. And so I'm kind of glad I got the chance to at least give that a shot. I don't understand anything about this movie.
Sure, it does get a little bit confusing at points. But yeah, I was the same way. I remember seeing it when I was in high school, and I was a big movie guy back then, and always got all the new releases. A big anime guy as well. For some reason, I never picked up Howl's Moving Castle. I think it just looked stupid to me. It looked like a kiddie, type movie where it's like, okay, like I think it said like presented by Disney. I don't know if Disney was responsible for the American release. I'm pretty sure they are. And anything with Disney in it, I always
totally sure,
and still continue to shy away from. I'm not a fan of Disney at all, but This movie really does have a Disney vibe in the sense. I feel like this movie is more Disney than most Disney movies are, because it is something I think that can be enjoyed by both adults and younger kids. I don't know how young I'd go. There are some scenes there are some intense action sequences, I guess you could say, which you could probably say the same for most cartoon movies. But I think
I could have probably watched this as a kid.
Yeah, I'm sure. Hell, I was like 8 years old, and my dad showed me Total Recall, and that movie like just totally freaked me. I had nightmares about the mutants with like their faces folded over and Quato and stuff, and the eyes popping out. I didn't like that. I did not like that at all. So yeah, if I could watch Total Recall and only have nightmares for like 2 nights as an 8-year-old, any kid should be able to watch Howl's Moving Castle.
Not to get too off topic there, but man, I saw the first Evil Dead when I was like 10 or 11 years old. What a bad idea!
Scarred.
That was like a 2-week panic attack. It was wild.
That's pretty fun.
I've never been the same. But yeah.
So, as far as Howl's Moving Castle goes, I don't know if we mentioned this is a Studio Ghibli movie, which is sort of like the Pixar or the Disney of Japan.
Right. Yeah. They actually did. I don't know if it was Ghibli exactly, but when Disney was picking up, I want to say it was like in the 80s or something. They started making their own sort of competitor films, and I think I could be wrong, but I want to say the first one was called Kimba. I want to say. It was about like a young lion a young lion cub growing up and dealing with tragedy and growing
and there's
stronger.
A lot of conspiracies about that movie being a ripoff, like either Lion King ripped off that movie or that movie ripped off Lion King.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Really not.
Soon after the Lion King came out, it was a story about a young lion cub who had to overcome adversity, and it's basically the same movie.
But I think the first thing anyone notices when they watch this movie, or even the first thing that comes to mind, is just how gorgeous this film is. And you had made a comment. Period. Yeah, you had made a comment while we were watching it that animation's actually getting worse. And
yeah, I said I feel like it's getting worse because I do watch a lot of like anime and stuff, and I really do kind of feel that way.
And everything in Howl's Moving Castle is just so bright and vibrant and colorful. Like a lot of pastel colors. It almost looks like a watercolor painting. Mm-hmm. And they really do a great blending of traditional hand-drawn animation with CGI. Whereas I felt like in Invincible, the CGI and the hand-drawn animation were like in 2 separate rooms, and it was so jarring when it would cut to the 3D scenes. I would say the best looking 3D animation from Invincible were just like the flags waving, which is a pretty common effect. You see that in Howl's Moving Castle at all, but from what I understand, because I've watched some of the making of videos of Howl's Moving Castle, they would draw the scenes and they would draw the faces of the buildings, and then they would actually layer them onto a 3D model of like the roadway or the alleyway, or 3D models of buildings, so that when the camera moved, you were actually panning past actual hand-drawn art.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And now the flags, I think, are pure CGI. The castle is a blend, but it looks great. It's such a. In fact, the artwork is so good that I actually own the coffee table book, The Art of Howl's Moving Castle, with just a ton of great, concept art sketches made by the writer and director of the movie. Lots of cool information. The only thing, it's a great book. The last 50 pages or so are the complete screenplay, which I thought was sort of a waste of book space. But if you're a fan of the art style, I've loved this book. It looks, again, everything is just so gorgeous. We've got this plant life and
I'm not surprised you have stuff like this.
I mean, I literally I own 2 art books, and this is one of them. So
Speaking of art, I think it's a good time to segue into our new. We got the budget to show people stuff now. They gave us
incredible.
all $5. I needed to figure this out. So for podcast listeners, you should definitely tune into Twitch and DLive and YouTube because we're going to try to be implementing more visual elements because I really wanted to the last couple of episodes. I just don't know how because I'm dumb. But we kind of figured it out. So you're talking about like the 3D animation and whatnot. I think we have a pretty good example of that right here. Let's see here, display capture. So I'm just figuring this out. So bear with me. There we go. I did it. Look at that.
Which image is this that we're looking at? This is a 3D.
This is where he's like waving at that airship.
Yeah, and where it's zooming in. So yeah. I believe that is actually a rendered 3D hallway with the textures, the hand-drawn textures applied to them. And there's a few shots like that, mostly down like alleyways or hallways. Do you want to pull up the GIF of the actual castle moving?
Yeah. Here's another one.
So some of this, I believe,
weird looking castle.
What is animated by the computer is the actual like swelling and pulsing.
Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me of like a lot of the like flash animation or some of the. I could be wrong about this or a little off base, but I feel like a lot of like modern day South Korean animation tends to do this thing where I think they call it Dragon Bones. I think it's like an actual program that you can use. But you kind of see here in this image, you see sort of almost like it's a bunch of different parts being animated at the same time. And that's kind of what that reminds. I don't know if that's actually what they're doing.
I do believe sort of that's what's happening. There's like a 5-minute video on YouTube where it's like it's the making of some of the effects in Howl's Moving Castle, and it shows you, those are all separate layers of all the different moving parts of the castle, and the castle I think looks really cool. The castle is very much a character in this movie, and it feels alive. If you're looking at that GIF still, you can see it actually has a face, it has eyes, it has legs, it walks around. The way it pulses almost makes it look like it's breathing, or like it's a living organism,
as opposed are like popping out and stuff.
Yeah, it has almost like a lizard face to it. Just fantastic. The shots of the inside of the castle, or really everything in this movie, is just overwhelmingly detailed. I know there's that shot.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that.
There's just so much visual detail crammed into every scene. I know the shot specifically Howl's bedroom, where everything's gold and there's just trinkets galore, and he has like a. Like wind chimes hanging. Yeah, we've got a picture for that. In the house, like just the clutter around. In the town, you can see rubbish on the streets, and it's just every frame is just painstakingly drawn, I think.
His room looks like a JRPG completionist's dream room, basically. He's got the legendary spear over here and all these artifacts and baubles and stuff.
All the bauble, every bauble you can imagine.
He's even got the word bauble, like it's just in the room, like he owns that.
The aesthetics of the movie are very much steampunk. Even like the very opening scene, I believe is a train, a steam engine plowing down through the middle of the town, and it's just coal smoke is billowing. The castle itself is steam driven, and the boiler is powered by one of the more fun characters in the movie. It's very very Victorian. Howl's Moving Castle is based off of a British children's novel, so you see a lot of Western, Victorian type inspiration, I would say, especially the cities and the architecture and the dress. Sophie, our main character, works for a hat shop, and everything, and even the scenes in the hat shop are just so detailed with racks of clothing that's in various states of completion. Just I don't know much about being a hatter, but there's so much. There's just so much in every scene.
You go crazy. That's the only thing I know. Eventually, the mercury drives you nuts.
That is accurate. And that's one of the interpretations of this film is that it's all just a fever dream that Sophie's having.
You know what? Before we get a little too off into the weeds, I guess let's drop a synopsis. What's this movie about, War? It's like your favorite movie ever.
This is one of my favorite movies. I love this movie. Really, so it's hard to describe. It's hard to sum up this film. But according to the official synopsis or the official production crew, it is a love story wrapped in a war setting, and it's sort of like the setting is just a backdrop. So it's not a war movie, even though it takes place in wartime. And just like how you might have a movie set in an apocalypse or a book set in an apocalypse, and the movie or the story really isn't about the apocalypse itself. That's just the setting, and it's about the characters and the stories and the struggles that people have in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
like The Walking Dead or something.
Like The Walking Dead, sure. And so I guess so the brief overview of this movie is that there is a woman, our heroine. She's almost like Cinderella, I would say, and she meets Howl, and she falls in love with him. He falls in love with her. I don't know. There's war. There's shit going on.
I have things to say about how that all goes down, but
sure. But I guess so the movie starts, right, and we're introduced to this sort of Victorian world, this steampunk world. We see the
kind of just shows everything going on.
Yeah, the castle's walking in the distance. Howl is this wizard who is in this castle, and the castle just roams the world, I guess. It roams the waste.
Yeah, I would say mainly the waste, it seems like.
Which is part of this world that is not, it's sort of, I don't know how you would describe it. Sort of like a no man's land.
Yeah, it's kind of the best.
Someone says there's nothing out there but witches and wizards, so it's not a place. It's almost like Oz, I guess you could call it. Something
along those lines. I definitely get Oz vibes from this movie, just in general. The way, because I went ahead and looked into the actual book itself, and I don't remember everything about the plot synopsis. But it basically did say it's basically just like steampunk fairy tale land.
Okay.
Which makes a lot of sense when you look at it and sort of take it.
That's very much what I would call this, steampunk fairy tale.
Yeah. So, the movie kind of, it's funny. It sort of throws you in as things are already going. Like the calmest it is right at the beginning when they introduce Sophie and she leaves, and then all of a sudden she's being pursued by these things, which I'm going to show right
Sure.
now.
And now before those things show up, we actually have this scene. This is a great scene. I love this scene. It's actually identical to the opening scene of V for Vendetta, and this is really the first scene of the movie. This is Sophie. She's walking down a back alley. There's like a parade going on, and she's accosted by two army men or some sort of like state police or some sort of official
whatever they are. They're the king's men. That's all.
They're the king's men, and they start harassing her. And this is almost, or really, it's completely identical to the beginning of V for Vendetta, where Natalie Portman's character is walking down a back alley, and she's accosted by two policemen in that world, and
she does,
and she is rescued by V for V. And in
rescued by V Vendetta.
Yes, V who has the vendetta, and in Howl's Moving Castle, Sophie is rescued by Howl, and this is important in both these movies because both Howl and V are sort of anti-heroes. It's established in Howl's Moving Castle that people sort of fear how he has a reputation for eating pretty girls' hearts. And V is a little bit more obvious. He's an actual terrorist. And the reason you have these scenes at the beginning of both of these movies is because audiences are stupid. And when you have an anti-hero, you have to make it clear right at the beginning that this is who you're rooting for. He's the good guy. They're rescuing damsels in distress. The state is almost comically evil, where, you know, you've got two men in V for Vendetta. They were going to sexually assault Natalie Portman. I don't know. You almost get that vibe from Howl's Moving Castle. It's not as explicit because it is a younger children's movie. I almost wonder if the Japanese script, it wasn't a little bit more intense of what these men were planning on doing, because that kind of shit is a little bit more loose in Japanese culture, I think.
It just depends, to be honest.
But yeah,
right. I definitely got the impression from this scene and the one immediately after, where like her mom or whatever is serving a bunch of customers in a bar or something, and she's just got like all these identical looking Kingsmen just asking for her hand in marriage and stuff. Like, this is just a town full of people who are full of men who are desperately trying to get married. Like, that's all I can get from this.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there is some sort of cultural thing that we're missing on that, but either way, you know, it very clearly establishes who the bad guys are and that who the good guys are. And, you know, Sophie, I mentioned earlier, anyway, she's like a Cinderella character. She is the ugly sister. Her mother really doesn't care for her or about her much, which
I didn't really get that vibe, I'll be honest. I didn't really get much of anything from the beginning.
That really, with the mother, that sort of comes into play later, but at the beginning, you know, it's mostly supportive, but again, she's working in this shop. She is sort of a plain Jane type person, and I don't know someone was talking about her not being pretty, or maybe she was talking about herself not being pretty.
I think she just thought that because she's probably surrounded by, you know,
sure, her sisters are her sisters and her mother are very classically beautiful. You know, their hair, they're blonde, their hair is very dramatically styled, whereas Sophie, you know, just has like her brown hair in a ponytail or like a basic braid.
A basic looking person, yeah.
A basic looking person. You know, anybody. Who the person, you know, young girls watching this movie, that's who they're relating to. You know, that's and right off the bat, Sophie's cursed. She is cursed by the Witch of the Waste, who is one of the fun. Yeah. She's a fun character too.
Enter in the fattest neck you've ever seen in your life.
And it's very overly done. Like, she's just drawn to be as repulsive looking and as vile as possible. And
that is the Jabba the Hutt.
Jabba the Hutt of the Howl's Moving Castle universe.
I had to get that in there. I'm sorry. So I don't remember exactly what her motivation is for going to Sophie here. In the book, Sophie has this power to speak life into objects, so she sees it as a threat and goes after Sophie. However, that's not the same motivation here. If I were to guess, she saw that Sophie was getting close to Howl and saw that as a threat, because later on in the movie, you come to find out that the Witch of the Waste, she doesn't have another name. Yeah, that's what her name is.
She is obsessed with Howl.
Yeah. So she probably, she saw that intrusion and decided she was going to like phantom dive into Sophie with a curse.
and she also puts another a note in her. She sneaks a note in her pocket, so she almost knows that Sophie is going to run into Howl again. This is premeditated. So we're establishing that magic is very common in this world, and I mean, they do such a good job of it. I don't know if it's just because live action fantasy it's just too expensive to have magic effects. But the way magic is portrayed in this universe, it just makes it feel so commonplace, and you really don't have to have much of a suspension of disbelief. It's not, they don't use the magic to just Deus Ex out of everything. You know, it's
No, yeah. Well, I mean, there's like one instance of that. It's the house has like a magic door,
Mhm.
and it's connected connected to four different kingdoms, I believe, or locations anyway. And it's all for business purposes, and like to survive. So, um, there's like a handle, you turn it, and it changes the portal basically, and it's a one-way street basically. So if that door opens from the inside, then you can greet that part of the world or
sure
whatever.
it's a
It doesn't
magic
go the
door.
other way around though. Yeah, it's a super magic door. That's about as close to Deus Ex as I would say.
Sure, but even
personally.
that's just so well established because he uses it. He basically, Howl is a magician,
Hmm.
and he's got alter egos, and he sort of finds himself in a dilemma right at the beginning because this door in his mythical castle opens up to a shop in both. I actually don't know any of the town names, but there's two different towns, and at each one he is a different magician, and people come and visit, and they buy spells and potions off of him, and really. I don't know really a lot of how the alliances. There's a lot to this story that it feels like we don't know, or there's like a whole lore. It's almost like a story set in Westeros, and I still think there was enough time to explain all the different kings and like how the kingdoms and how they are aligned, and maybe that's intentional. I think the story still works, but it does feel like we are in the dark in a lot of things.
So that was kind of one of my biggest complaints with the movie is there's some really great visual storytelling. Like there's a lot that you can interpret and get from just paying attention to things happening on screen. Like the door thing, they didn't have to explain it. You could just see it and understand kind of how it worked. Same thing with like Calcifer the fire demon. I mean, there's a little explaining there. That's fine. But like the actual story itself, the writing part, there might as, in my opinion, there might as well not have even been a war. Like the war didn't even matter at the end of the day, as far as
I suppose.
yeah, I mean, because the major conflict, from what I could tell in the movie, was Howl versus himself, and I feel like you don't really spend enough screen time to really get that from him, because he spends so much time just doing his own thing.
Mhm.
You kind of get the impression that he is this mastermind that knows exactly what he's doing at all times, except for when he's not, which is
Do you get that impression from him that he's some sort of mastermind?
at most of the movie. Yeah, but there's 2-3 times where obviously he falls short. Well, one time isn't his fault. That's Sophie's fault, I guess. But
Sure.
when they dye his hair or whatever.
I think the best way to describe Hal in this movie is that he is pure of heart.
Yeah.
He's noble. He wants to do the right thing. I don't know if you would call him a pacifist. He definitely detests the war, and he detests what's going on with the other wizards and witches taking part of this war. But at the same time, he's petulant, he's childish. By his own admission, he's a coward. So he does have a lot of shortcomings, which...
Well, yeah, I mean, he straight up just says, like, oh, I'm just super lazy, and I don't really like working very much, and that's in line with the same character from the book, from what I read. He even goes so far as to, I'd say, probably one of the more pivotal points in the movie. He sends Sophie as his mother to go represent him at the kingdom, whatever it's called. I don't know what it's called. And that's kind of like where you have this this really weird showdown between like Sophie and the Witch of the West.
That's actually one of my favorite scenes, and I definitely want to get into that. But before we keep going, so Sophie is this. She's cursed. She's turned into an old woman.
Oh yeah, we didn't tell what the curse was.
She's turned into a 90-year-old woman. and essentially flees her home and leaves. And that's she meets Turnip Head, who's a reoccurring character. Although before that,
I think I got.
There's a blink and you miss it moment where some people in the background are talking. They're reading the newspaper and they're discussing how this prince from a neighboring kingdom is missing and how it's going to lead to war. And I feel like that could have been expanded upon some, because the first time I watched it, I did not catch that at all. And it's the volume is low because they're in the distance. So they sort of do lead or lay the groundwork for this war throughout the movie, but it's such a minimal part of it.
Right. And I kind of feel like a lot of the world building stuff is what I'll call it. A lot of that could have probably been fleshed out and expounded upon to do nothing other, like if nothing else, to help immerse the person watching into the world, because I kind of felt like I was just watching like this glazed over fever dream. It was really pretty to look at. I liked a lot of the characters. I actually really like Sophie. One of the things I had jotted down was they do this really good job at fleshing out and making you like this character that's completely unrelatable. Because I would guess that most people aren't 90 years old. So I can kind of relate to certain things, but like they do things with the dialogue and how she acts.
Sure, she really
help you connect with her.
She's compelling. She herself is compelled, and she really takes matters into her own hands. Even when she's totally unable to deal with whatever's going on at the moment, she just goes ahead and does it. She runs immediately after she comes across Howl's moving castle. I think she's led there by Turnip Head. She's out wandering the waste, comes across the castle, and the first thing she does is just starts cleaning. She starts cooking, she starts cleaning. She essentially hires herself on as the cleaning woman. And throughout that, you see Sophie's always taking action. We were talking about when Howl was too lazy or too cowardly to show up for his summons. He's essentially being conscripted into the army. And that's one of the conflicts, is that he's conscripted as both himself and one of his alter egos into two separate armies. And he sends Sophie in his place, and she's always doing stuff.
Yeah, I think maybe this is on me, for sure. Like I didn't even know about the being in two armies at the same time thing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I was paying attention. We sat through the Matrix and Matrix 4 and all that. If I can understand everything happening in that to the point where even the little subtle nuances, like just in like camera angles and what's going on in this scene and that scene, without anyone saying anything, if I can understand that, it kind of makes me wonder, like, did I screw up here?
Admittedly, we've both seen The Matrix so many times, and I think there's a ton of details like that we did watch probably the first couple times we watched The Matrix, and I think the same can be said for Howl's moving castle, because Merkel even says, I think, to Sophie, like, oh no, Howl, or he says to Howl, like, you've got to show up here as, Pendragon, and you've got to show up here as somebody else, and it's...
yeah. See,
it is laid out, and I think sort of the last main character we meet in the opening act is Kelsifer, who is a great character. He's hilarious. He's funny. He really is the comic relief. I want to think he's a fire demon, great. And I think your wife, in fact, put this on the nose, where she said that he reminded her of the Suit demons, or the Suit.
No, that was me. I was I was reminded of the little soot sprites from Spirited Away.
Spirited Away. That's a lot. Mm-hmm. I think what Kelsifer reminds me of, this little cute guy. But that's like
a Ghibli. That's just like a thing they do in like all their movies. They always have like a little sprite or like some kind of spirit or something.
Sure, it works. It works. I think everybody loves Kelsifer. I always forget his name. I always want to call him Cyndaquil, which I know is wrong because that's a Pokemon. And even rewatching the movie this time, I didn't remember his name until he was introduced. So I don't know if I'm just an idiot, but I love the name. It's such a great.
Like, am I just stupid? Is that? Yeah, he's pretty good. Like that. That's what stood out to me in this movie, though, were the characters. Like 100%. It was a pretty entertaining movie. The only thing I have a problem with is sort of the connective tissue, I guess. That's
elaborate on what connective tissue you don't like.
Again, it's not that I dislike anything necessarily. It's just it was hard for me to kind of grasp exactly what was going on, and I think a lot of it has to do with. And now that we're talking about it, it kind of makes me feel as if, and it's probably a good thing actually from a writing standpoint. It feels like they just kind of made the movie, and they kind of throw the audience member in there. Like you would in anybody in any everyday or daily life scenario where like it's just life, it's just happening, so they don't have to use all this exposition to describe everything.
Sure,
and that's kind of how it feels now that I'm thinking back on it.
Well, that's Sophie is definitely a vessel for the audience. I think that is illustrated best sort of in the beginning when she's exploring that door and she switches it and she opens it up. She goes, "Oh, I'm here," and she goes back in, turns it, and she's like, "Oh, we're back here in my hometown." And instead of just outright saying like, "Oh, the blue leads to this town, red leads to that town," she is actually experiencing it herself.
True.
And I think a lot of it, even with the war stuff, even the people in the town, they're shocked. They see a battleship come in, which is another great scene. It's just a great visual. It's this half-sunk battleship being towed into this bay, and then the enemy troops fly overhead and drop pamphlets, enemy propaganda into the town. And
yeah,
really, you got to think about 1800s or these periods. The everyday Joe Schmo didn't know what was going on. Might not have known really the truth of anything, because governments are only telling people what they want to tell their people. No one's gonna say Winston Churchill was never like, we just lost 600 troops, it was a total blunder and blah blah blah. So it feels like the way the characters experience the war and the way that it's really not illustrated to the audience, that sort of works for me, because it does feel like you're part of this small world of these people in the story, and the war is just a bigger thing going on that's beyond their comprehension. Like even in modern days, do we know what's going on between Russia and Ukraine and what the Taliban's doing? Not really. Yeah. Even the stuff we read is like, who's to say what's real? Because Russia has their own news channels that Russia they're saying that Ukraine is being hostile towards Russia, and we say that Russia is being hostile towards Ukraine. Nobody really knows what's going on. Probably not even the people in those towns. So that makes it feel real to me when you have that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think you're actually kind of spot on there.
Thank
especially
you.
with the news thing, because shoot, we have people in the same country, like you said, over here. We're the most connected we've ever been, and yet the most disconnected we have ever been.
Oh, sure. There's just so much information, like who's to say what's true? And I guess the last character, I sort of mentioned this, was the castle itself, and the castle was a dynamic character, very dynamic. It changes more dramatically as we go, but initially it's a mess. It's a bachelor pad. How's living there? There's just trash piled everywhere. There's cobwebs. There's bugs. The floors and walls are filthy. And immediately Sophie goes in. She starts cleaning, and that's sort of. I think even the castle is sort of an extension of Howl himself, because when she shows up, Howl's a wreck, the house is a wreck, and then as the house gets clean, and then at one point Howl starts reorganizing, like when later in the second act,
when they go to move or whatever.
Yeah, when they move and they rearrange it. But we're sort of jumping ahead, so we want to back up to where we were in the story. So Howl is summoned to Madame Solomon's castle, who is, I guess, she's like the top witch, and she's the advisor of the king of that town.
Yeah, that's kind of what it sounded like.
So basically, the kings of all of these different nations, I guess, are summoning. They're essentially drafting anyone with magical ability to fight in this war. And Sophie is sent in Howl's place to the capital. And we have the best scene here. This is where she runs into the Witch of the Waste again, and they climb up these stairs.
It's like the weirdest scene in the movie.
And
it's
yeah, you have the big fat witch. She's just sweating. Her like body is melting.
Literally melting.
She's struggling to get up, and Sophie is sort of taunting her, like, you know, if I weren't so old and you were to break this curse, I would help you. But of course she doesn't, and it just goes on, and Sophie's struggling to carry up the dog, which she believes mistakenly is Howl in a.
Yeah, because he sends her off, and he's like, "Yeah, don't worry, I'll be right behind you."
Yeah, he says, "I'll be there," and she sees this dog, and she's like, "Oh, that must be Howl." Yeah, and the audience is led to believe it's Howl, and she carries this dog the whole way up the steps. And as we find out, it's Madame Solomon's dog, who is sort of like a spy for her. She like remotely views what's going on through the dog's eyes, I think.
I think he checks in because I think its name is Heen. Heen is supposed to be the spy for her or whatever. He's the worst spy ever. Because after this whole ordeal, he ends up kind of just becoming part of the family. And like near the end of the movie, he shows back up at her doorstep basically, and she's just like, "Why'd you take so long to check in?" Yeah,
I barely remember that.
Yeah, she's like, "Why'd you take so long to check in? You freaking traitor, you miserable mutt." And she's got this crystal ball that shows kind of like what he's seeing, but it seems like he has control over that or something.
Does he? Yeah, that crystal ball, I was thinking, it's like sort of like he was like the best spy, because if she was able to watch everything they were doing the whole time, but the whole Madame Solomon plot is the most confusing part to me.
It comes and goes.
I get
like it's
so
just there, and then
she strikes down the Witch of the Waste and steals her powers, which reverts her to her real age, which is this very old woman,
500 years old.
500 years old, and then
literally just a walking neck.
And this is where it gets very fever dreamish, where they're trying to steal Howl's powers, and like there's these like stick figure shadows, and like they're suddenly like in a forest or something. It's so bizarre. I always get lost at that part, but I guess with the power of Sophie's, just being there, she helps Howl break free, and they escape. And there's a small chase scene, but we learn that Howl using his powers is also sort of like a curse, and he changes into this bird monster.
Yeah, I actually got a picture for that too. Let me find that. Well, it's not a picture. It's a.
Is this when he is at when he's like this? Excuse me, almost a full monster.
Yeah. So he sort of turns into this thing. He doesn't stay, like you can see here in this image here. He's like this giant bird monster, and then if you look at his face, it looks like he's got fangs or something. That's the only time you see him like that. Later on, it's just his face.
That is when that's sort of near the end of Act 2. That's when our hero is at his lowest point, JT, and he's just regressed into almost a full monster. He rejects Sophie at that point. So we sort of start seeing Sophie start to de-age through these scenes, and it's sort of in proportion to how close she is to how I think the implication is that true love breaks the spell, and this is actually, she's almost completely young again when Howl is at that lowest point, and she says something. I think she even says, "I love you," and then he goes, "Ah!" and he flies away. And as he flies away, his wing crosses, and then she's back to being a complete 90-year-old again.
Yeah, and she was mentioning like, "Hey, help me break this curse," or something like, or I can help you break your curse, and he basically just shunned her and was like, "Well, you don't even know how to break your own curse." And then there's a lot of characters with curses in here that don't really have concrete answers, except for one near the end, anyway.
Sure. So, yeah, we've got. They try to steal Howl's powers. I don't remember why he throws a temper tantrum, but it is implied that eventually, if he keeps exerting himself with his magic, that he will no longer be able to turn back into a human. Some of the monsters he fights throughout are wizards and witches who did turn themselves into monsters to fight for their nations, and he says that, you know, they'll be so far gone that they won't even remember they're human and they'll never change back. So that's sort of a conflict, and that's almost like the conflict with Howl and himself, I would say.
Because he's sort of doing the same thing that he's accusing them of.
Yeah,
just
and
to try to get out of this situation.
He tries to be noble, but he does sacrifice a little part of him every time he sort of does this. And when he turns into that monster and he flees, he comes back the next morning and he's suddenly like chipper and happy.
Right.
And I almost feel like
is that when they go to move?
This is when he restructures the house and they move the house. So
right.
I honestly feel like Howl is being depicted as someone who's suicidal at that point, because he's sort of resigned to defeat.
Or just knows something bad could be coming. Yeah.
He says that he's going to go fight, and it's like he's going to go fight and die. Like, he knows he's going to die. But he is just committed at this point. And maybe not, again, maybe suicidal isn't the right word, because he's going to go fight and die and do the right thing. At least he thinks he's going to die. So he sort of perks up. He restructures the house with his magic. We see the fire demon, Cyndaquil. He goes full demon, and he like lifts the house up, and the rooms change, and the house suddenly becomes beautiful, and it becomes larger. And he even says, he adds rooms onto it because their family grows. The witch is now part of their little band of people now that she doesn't have her powers, and she's just like a helpless old woman. They've got that dog with them. For some reason, he just tags along.
Yeah, that's a lot of the characters. Just for some reason, they're just here.
Yeah, a lot of shit going on that maybe doesn't necessarily have a reason to it, but it's a great cast of characters. I know the witch is there. The witch is in love with Howl, even in her old dementia-ridden self. She goes and she steals his heart there at the end, literally.
Yeah. There's this whole thing where Calcifer is enveloping Howl's heart, I believe, which is also which is also a shooting star that he swallowed when he was a kid, or something. I don't know what happened in this movie.
Yeah, so one of the doors leads to Howl's childhood, where Sophie learns that, I guess maybe this is where he got his powers. I don't know. So the demon arrived on Earth via a shooting star and sort of bonded with Howl. I don't know. Howl's heart is inside of this fire demon. So they sort of have a symbiotic relationship.
Right, just like Venom.
Or it might be a curse, too. I think Cyndaquil or Calcifer says he's cursed at some point. I don't know. Everybody's got curses on them.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was alluding to earlier. Is like, everyone's cursed for some reason or another. They've got like anti-plot armor, sort of. That's not true, because there are definitely parts in this movie where people should have died and they just didn't. Like, especially near the end there. All right, so I guess moving forward in the story, there's not really that much more to cover.
We also see Howl has this. I think this is sort of part. This is like the gift that he gives Sophie, and this is where I sort of got the suicidal vibe, because like when people know that they're gonna die, Maybe even if it's not necessarily suicide, if they've got like cancer or some sort of terminal illness, they will sort of give heartfelt gifts to their loved ones. And
right, he basically does just that. Yeah.
He gives Sophie this beautiful landscape, which was his cabin where he grew up in and sort of studied magic. And we see during that scene one of the warships arrive, and that's that gift that you pulled up earlier with this big, just completely this totally impractical ship that's flapping on these giant wings. There's no way it could ever exist, but we're in fantasy, and that shows up at this beautiful meadow. And I feel like one of the themes of the movie is that war reaches all. It spreads its filthy, corrupting tendrils to even the most idyllic, remote spots of this world. Because one of the ships crashes, all the monsters jump out and start attacking Howl. He begins to turn into the monster again. Mm-hmm. And I would say it has a very anti-war message, which who is pro-war, I guess you could say.
I mean, they're out there.
They're out there.
I think you'd also be happy to know that we got our first chat in tonight. However, it was people screaming the N-word, so...
Oh, amazing. Amazing.
We're officially... We're popular now, right?
We've got trolls.
We've made it.
See, a lot of the end of the second act and the final act are very abstract.
It's all over the place.
It's hard to, is some of this, symbolism, is it just nonsense? Is it just weird fantasy stuff? It's hard to say.
And I could kind of see, going back to what you said near the beginning when I made the hat joke, I could see how this could be construed as like, okay, it's just a girl who went nuts and is like a crazy fever dream.
And that was a joke. Yeah, I don't think there's actually a conspiracy. There's always fan theories. You look at Inception or The Matrix. There's no end of fan theories. This isn't an actual fan theory. I don't think anyone actually believes this movie is just all a fever dream from a literal Mad Hatter. But yeah, that's it certainly feels that way. She's got this magic ring. We see the house start to change some more. Yeah, there's a literal magic ring that connects the Howl's soul, I guess, and always points to him. And I guess the movie ends, right? Like, Howl...
They live happily ever after.
Everybody lives happily after. Yeah. The house essentially keeps shedding rooms until it's just a walking platform. The castle is essentially destroyed in the final act. It just keeps becoming smaller and smaller. They crash a plane into it at one point.
Yeah, they do.
And then
eventually it falls down like a valley with all of the main characters on it, I want to say, and they all should have been dead.
And Turniphead saves the day. He jumps in front of it and slows it down with his broomstick body.
Right, he's the best character in the movie, Turniphead,
who is a silent character. He just sort of hops around, sort of leading Sophie about. Really, Turniphead is the one who I think leads Sophie to the castle in the first place. Yeah,
he is. And you find out at the... it's really funny what they do with him. You find out at the end of the movie that... because Sophie is like... I guess she's just like really in love with her little family here and stuff, and she's just going by everybody one after another and like kissing them on the cheek.
Kissing everybody.
And, Turniphead breaks his legs to save their life. And she goes over and gives him a little kiss on his turnip cheek, and he turns into a human. And that was the missing prince that kind of blink and you miss it, who got cursed into this thing.
And the implication is that this will end the war because the prince has been missing. He's back, and I think he even says it's time to put an end to this silly war or something.
Something like that.
He sort of gets
so funny to me though, just real quick. The way that the curse was broken is to get kissed by their one true love, and then she immediately 180s and then just go straight to.
Well, it's like, yeah, he gets the short end of the stick, like literally. He's literally gets the short end of the stick. But apparently, Sophie is his true love, but Sophie's true love is Howl. So this poor prince, and I thought would have. So here's where the plot missed something that could have been a good idea. It was actually my girlfriend I was watching this movie with, and she thought this is what happened, and I'm like, no, that's not what happened. But that would have been a better ending. So the main antagonist of the movie initially is the Witch of the Waste, until she's struck down and sort of joins them. And then the bad guy shifts to this Madame Solomon, who tries to steal Howl's powers. And Madame Solomon, I believe, is the most powerful witch, or she's like the she's the head witch. And it would have been it would have better established her as the antagonist if Turnip Head, the prince, was the, because they never say who puts the curse and turns him into the Turnip Head. I think it should have been Madame Solomon cursed him and turned him into this creature, into this scare. He's actually a scarecrow.
Basically,
and,
yeah.
So it would have been great if she had done that, because her sort of motivation was she was exploiting the war to steal the magic power from some of these powerful wizards in the land, and that I think would have really fit in with her motivations as a sort of evil character. You know,
it would have been like the crux of
yeah, like she was behind the scenes, doing these machinations to start this war, and presumably would have had something to gain from it. That's really never explored, but we're at this point, we're in like the last 5 minutes, and
yeah, I think ultimately that was my issue with the story is, and I think I sort of explained this to you after the movie was over. I kind of got like Final Fantasy VIII vibes from this movie. Final Fantasy VIII it's a love story on the backdrop of like a big war, basically, and then some other stuff happens. But it's mostly a love story. But everything is explained well enough to where I'm invested not just in the story with the characters, but the actual world itself, to an extent anyway. That being said, it's one of the worst Final Fantasies ever made. I wouldn't play it if I were you, but that's just me. The story's decent. The gameplay is trash. But yeah, that was kind of my main issue. I feel like, and it's a 2-hour movie, so I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't be worth it.
I do agree with you.
They could have just made some of this stuff make a bit more sense.
The setting is definitely secondary. The war is definitely secondary. It's
right.
It's really a human story, and
yeah, and I think that's where you're right. Is kind of like what you said. It's just people living their lives, and we're sort of thrown into that with them, and
that might not work for everybody. I think, and it might not even work for every single movie or story. But for me, I really thought that worked. And again, I do agree that some things should have been elaborated on, like who cursed this. Who put the curse on the prince in the first place? Because really, that person is the main antagonist. Because that person started the whole war to begin with. And if you've already got this evil Madame Solomon character established, I think if you'd worked her in, I think that would have just tied the bow off nicely at the end. Because I do concede that most of that stuff is just a background element, and that it could have been better fleshed out. But
by the end of the movie, she's not really even a bad guy anymore. Like she just
the Witch of the Waste?
No, Solomon.
Solomon.
She's just sort of portrayed as like this.
I don't even know if we see her.
Work out.
Yeah, it's
at the end.
We do see her at the end, but after she tries to steal Howl's powers, she's basically nowhere to be seen until that last scene. So I think that, like, do you agree? Would that not have been a cool little twist at the end?
It would have been better.
And then you could have even had her. You could have even had one additional scene where it shows like that king that was sort of conferring with her, that Howl had duplicated himself to look like. You could have had just like a 5-second scene of him saying like lock her up, and like she's being dragged off by those guys. The state boys in their blue shirts. would have been a nice, okay, the bad guy got their comeuppance in the end. We really don't see that. Instead, we get a scene where Howl gets his heart back, which also turns Kelsifer back into the shooting star.
And then he runs away for a little bit.
He runs
and he
away,
comes back.
and then he comes back. And I almost feel like this is like something that Disney put in there, and I'd love to see like how the script changed, or it feels like a studio executive decision where the Calcifer like shoots off in like this just glow of light, and that could have been it.
Yeah,
but then he comes back. And there's a voiceover, and he's like, "Hey, I'm Calcifer. I'm still alive. I'm still here. I'm okay. Everything worked out great." And I felt like that was almost like
I missed you guys.
Yeah, like they just had to have that voiceover in there so that everybody knows, like, okay, this character we loved is okay. It's not that he just goes and vanishes. It felt a little bit overdone.
I guess with all that being said, it's rounding up to an hour, which honestly, I'm as surprised as you are. We were able to ramble on about that movie for an hour, and overall thoughts.
Absolutely.
I know for some stupid reason I throw number ratings on these movies. It's just what I do, I guess. I give it a solid 8 out of 10.
Man, I don't know if I want to say 10. I really can barely think about the things that I don't like in the movie.
It's really just what we've already talked about.
It does go Snoop the Loop there when these weird magical stick figures are dancing around in a circle. Some of the stuff is really unclear. I guess I would go 9 out of 10. Strongly recommend it. It does have a sort of...
I'm just going to show off some panoramas real quick while you're talking.
Please. The love story does feel kind of like a Lifetime original movie where it's, first she's saved by Howl, and then Sophie gets saved, and then later she saves him, and it's a very trite thing where it's like, okay, there's this guy, he's broken, he's got issues, he's like, the Bachelor, his place is a mess, and she shows up, shows him how to live, shows him how to love even. It's very... And again, it's something that women love. Women love the idea.
Cleans his life up.
Yeah, women love that idea of meeting a guy and then fixing something about him. I don't know what it is about it. You see it everywhere. That some of that might feel kind of shallow. Let's see, what else do I have? Anything else that I didn't get to mention? Oh, the sound design I think is great.
Sound design's great.
The main theme I love. I like right at the beginning where they're flying through the sky. There's a part where their feet touch down and they sort of jump off this the peak of the steeple, and the click of their feet. It just sounds so real. It sounds so solid. The dog, when he scrapes his feet and he makes little huffing, wheezing noises, it just...
he doesn't bark, he wheezes.
Perfect sound design. I think the sound design I like even better than the overall score, because I didn't even notice the score too much aside from the main theme.
I think I'm with you there, yeah. Just while we're on sound, the English dub, I was very happy with.
The English dub is fantastic. Christian Bale does the voice of Howl. Calcifer is Billy Crystal, who you might know as the voice of Mike Wachowski from the Monsters Inc. films. Really, all of the voice acting is fantastic, which I think that was the Disney money that made that dubbing so successful. I don't know. Again, I'm not too sure of Disney's involvement with the American release, but again, Christian Bale, that's a pretty A-list actor. I don't know who did Sophie or did some of the other folks, but
I can't remember her name. I looked it up when we were watching, but she did a fantastic job. I was, with all the voice acting, that's what I was the most impressed with, was how she voiced Sophie.
And it was it was an old woman who did the old, she really is old, and Those are some great
And
scenes where she complaining about like, the wind's blowing right through me. Being old is awful.
yeah, and I was just really taken aback with how good her performance was. You just don't really expect a whole lot of like I don't.
It's hard to be impressed by voice acting, I guess. Is
Yeah,
right.
that's kind
I
of the
mean, like,
best way
how
to put
often do you
that.
notice and be like, man, that was great. Like, they sounded great. Their voices are great. You could understand everybody.
You know when it's bad.
You do know,
Like you
yeah.
always know when it's
I
bad.
think that's I think that is definitely. It's not something you notice unless it's bad. That's a pretty good way of putting it. But yeah, it's not a perfect movie. It does get slow near the end of the second act, or when we're learning Hal's origin story. Some of that
Hmm.
stuff is a bit bizarre. But yeah, I'd give it a solid 9 out of 10. I think it was an interesting change of pace to go from Invincible to Howl's Moving Castle. They really
Yeah,
are sort
yeah.
of opposite.
Completely opposite. Yeah, like in how they're animated, how they're freaking presented, tone, everything. Yeah, I mean, go figure, right? Different stories, but yeah, no, I mean it it was a good transition. I'm kind of glad we did this. I'm glad I got the chance to watch the movie and really form a relatively solid opinion about it. Um, I guess with that, any closing thoughts?
I don't think so. I certainly recommend the movie if my hour-long praise hasn't
It's worth a
implied that
watch.
hard enough. It's definitely worth a watch, especially if you're a fan of anime, I would say. But even if you're not, I've shown this to a few people who don't even know what anime is, and they've all loved it. I've never really heard anyone say anything bad about this film.
I feel like Ghibli is anime in name only. To be honest, it really is kind of its own thing. The way that they're animated
Sure,
and
but
drawn.
even among Ghibli films, I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of Studio Ghibli. I think most of their films are just they get very abstract. Like The Spirited Away is probably their most famous film, and that whole
Yeah,
movie, it's just like everything is so meaningless because it's just so off the wall.
right. Yeah,
This
I need to
this
watch it again, but
it's probably worth seeing that movie again too. Even me, I probably haven't seen that in 7 8 years or so. But yeah, a word from our sponsors. This episode was brought to you by Diet Dr Pepper, and
that's
go
not
drink
true.
it. Go drink Diet Dr Pepper.
We've not been sponsored by this.
Wrong. I'm getting big bucks from from Big Diet Dr Pepper to shill their products here on
His
Colleidocast.
he is. I don't know anything about that. Anyway, uh, I guess plugs. I'm now. I think I said it last time. I'm now on basically everything on Twitter, Getter, Gab, all that stuff. Just look up JTFM, except for SoundCloud. That's just Colleidocast. And you can find me on Discord in his server, the
The
War and
War and
Whiskey
Whiskey
server.
server. Yeah, I guess I'm War. We didn't introduce ourselves at the beginning of this episode, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm on
Oops.
Twitter at War and Whiskey with some underlines. You can go to warandwhiskey.com. There's links to my stuff there. I did a podcast at one point. Basically, my biggest thing going on right now is this Discord server where I'm doing a fitness self-help program. We're 14 days into it. I personally I haven't drank in 14 days. I One of the other guys we were just talking to earlier today. He is already down 10 pounds. He was up there about 300 some, so he had a lot more weight to lose. It's a very supportive community. Get in here. We love you. We love everything. It is a right wing focused server. A lot of those are Donald Trump fans, so if that's not your thing, you might not be as enthralled with the company there.
But we do
Aside,
welcome
we do,
pretty much
yeah,
everybody.
we've got people who are not Trump fans. We've got people who are pretty far to the left in there. Anyone who wants to join and just be generally decent is welcome. And we have a lot of fun in there. We talk a lot of shit. But it's all in good humor.
Hmm.
It's all there's a camaraderie, I would say there. I've got a book coming out. Hopefully in not too long, maybe a few months. I'll definitely be shilling that when it's ready. You can go read some of my existing books. Well, I recommend Moon Panic: A Tale of Anguish and Suffering. You can find that on Amazon for 99 cents.
I started reading that.
It's great. You should, JT, you should read that book, and then we'll do an episode on Moon Panic.
We should we should do like an audiobook of that. One of us can read it.
We should.
That wouldn't
Not
be
it.
too bad, probably.
But yeah,
All right.
another episode in the bag. It was great talking to you, JT. I don't know what we're going to talk about next week, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. So stay tuned.
It'll be hard to figure out. We're getting out of here. All right. Well, till next time. We'll be on a Thursday if I don't get COVID again. Dog's barking. It will be on Thursday, same time as always, 7 p.m. And I will put up on social media what we're going to be talking about. We'll figure it out pretty soon, I'm sure. So till next time, take it easy. And tell your friends about this great podcast.
Or don't. We don't care.
I care a little bit.
He cares.
Later.